Okay, good afternoon. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. This afternoon, I'm really pleased to have with me as my guest, Kara Baysinger, who's a partner at Willkie. Kara, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Richard. It's nice to be with you.
So, Kara, I wanted to talk to you about this book you co-authored called Courageous Counsel: Conversations with Women General Counsel in the Fortune 500. Tell me a little about the history of this book and why you decided to write such a book.
I'm glad to. So I co-authored this book with Michelle Coleman-Mays. And at the time that we started on this project, she was the general counsel at Allstate. And I was at a prior firm, and we were both speaking very frequently about the importance of women advancing to the role of general counsel, the importance of mentorship and sponsorship in that path, the importance of diversity in the general counsel's office and in in-house law departments. And as I said, she was a sitting general counsel. I had been in-house for 10 years before I joined a law firm, and am very actively involved in coaching women general counsels. So we had all of this interest and all of this knowledge about women general counsels and passion about diversity. And we were approached about first writing an article about women general counsel, and we kind of dismissed that as, and like a chronology. But we started talking and said, you know what, wouldn't it be interesting to try to identify what the similarities are among these women who arguably have reached the pinnacle of in-house legal practice? Is there a special sauce, we kept calling it? Is there a certain set of experiences or credentials or qualities that make somebody especially suited to being a general counsel, and in that case, in the Fortune 500, right? In these very large, very complex organizations. That was a project that intrigued both of us, where we said, you know what, there's probably something to learn here. We probably have some assumptions. The world probably has some assumptions about how you get to these jobs. Let's see if it's true. So we set out to interview as many of them as we could, given a short time frame. And we spoke to over 50 then sitting former or about to be general counsels, female general counsels in the Fortune 500. And we talked to a number of recruiters who put general counsels in these roles, a number of experts on board strategy and on corporate governance, to just learn a lot about how the role of general counsel was evolving and whether that played to the stereotypical strengths that women had. You're trying to put the puzzle pieces together to say, clearly there were far too few female general counsels in the Fortune 500, but what does the landscape look like? And how are these women who serve in this role, how did they get there? And what were the launch codes for them?
How did you find that you had a hard time getting 50 to participate, or did you have way too many and had you cut it off at 50?
Some of both. At first, it was a little harder because this was a fresh project, and we actually sat down and interviewed each of them. Wow. So there was a lot of work that went into that. It was hard at first, but then by the end, we had probably a surplus. And there were lots of interesting people to talk to that were excited about what we were doing, and we were wanting to close the project and actually start writing.
Yeah. And how long was each interview? Like roughly how long did you interview them for?
It totally depended. Some of them were over dinner and wine. And so then that of course was a longer thing. And others were, an hour in their office between other meetings. So it totally depended.
And did you record them? Did you record them, or did you just take notes? You did not.
Yeah, we took notes. It was intentionally candid. And it was intentionally conversational. So we took notes and then synthesized them. So there are lots of things that we talk about in the book where we don't name names, but we synthesize the comments of a number of the women. There are other stories in the book that are absolutely credited to the people who told us the stories, right?
Totally.
And the book itself has a pretty casual style. It's storytelling and anecdote inclusive, so hopefully an easy read. And what really excited Michelle and I about writing this is believing in the importance of mentorship and sponsorship, we felt that there were probably lots of lawyers out there, male and female, who don't have strong mentors or examples in their own organizations, and where perhaps if we wrote something like this, it could serve as a mentoring tool for lots of people to learn the lessons that these incredible women had to teach. And it has proven to be so. There have been many general counsels, male and female, and all the way to Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the mayor of New York, and lots of people who have commented that the book was a terrific resource for up-and-coming leaders in the legal industry.
Well, what were some of the themes that you discovered? You described you tried to find the secret sauce. Did you find it?
We found that there was no one path. So you did not have to have gone to an Ivy League school. You did not have to have been a corporate attorney or litigator or any particular type of attorney coming out. You didn't have to have started in big law. You didn't have to have started in the prosecutor's office, right? There was no one path, which is interesting in and of itself, right? There's not one way to get to those spots. Some of the general counsels had risen through the organizations, and some had been hired out of government or law firms or what have you. We also found that there was no one personality type. We had some of the women general counsel who were very, dynamic speakers and big personalities, and others who were much more introverted and much more reserved personally, equally successful in this world. What we did find were a couple of themes that emerged. The most significant one, and hence the title of the book, was courage. So these women, 201, every single one of them, had stories of times when they had to stand up and be heard, when what they were saying or their voice was unpopular, when they had to take on something that nobody else wanted to touch, whether it was a project or a business line or a role that was hard. And it took a stretch, right? Where they jumped ahead and they were willing to steel themselves against what would be daunting to most people. Every one of them had a story like that. Every single one. The willingness to raise their hand and speak up for what's important, even in the face of adversity. To say the other themes that were a little bit less resonant and a little bit more diffuse were the importance of sponsorships and mentors, and both as very different concepts, right? Mentorship can happen all the time. It happens around you. It's learning from others, but sponsorship is having somebody in the organization to speak on your behalf when you're not in the room. And almost everyone, not everyone, everyone said they had mentors, but almost every one of the women general counsels can point to a sponsor at some point in their career who was able to say, wait a second, you should consider so-and-so. This is what value she brings. This is the importance of her in this role. And it was critically important for some of these women, especially the early ones, the early general counsel, to have somebody who will speak up for them when they're not there. And then the last theme was important, right? Whether you're the shy introvert or the dynamic public speaker, to be true to yourself and to listen to your internal voice and to speak when it's important, to speak up, but to do it in your own authentic style. So there's the summary of the themes. I wanted to finish that out.
How long did it take you to write the whole book, from beginning to end, from the beginning of interviews to get it published?
About 1.5 years. We had initially thought it would be about 6 months, but once we got going with the interviews, they were not only fascinating, we kept wanting to do more. And we found that it became a passion project for both of us.
What was the hardest part about writing that book?
Probably stopping, right? Because all of these women had amazing stories to tell and were individually so interesting and worked for fascinating companies and had interesting dynamics. And the hard part was deciding when we had enough critical mass to analyze the data and to really come up with our conclusions because it would have been delightful to keep going. And it would have been lovely to do more than the Fortune 500, right? We needed some sort of a framework to make it manageable. But there are lots of really exciting, dynamic, fabulous general counsels outside of the Fortune 500. Of course.
Didn't it take a long time to synthesize? I mean, you must have pages and pages and volumes of notes to synthesize it down to a compact book.
It took a while, but the themes emerged pretty quickly.
Oh, interesting.
The themes that I talked to you about, like almost every one, we could hear those themes pretty quickly. And it's always the case, as you get further into a project, you hone your questions a little bit more. So we became more efficient at getting people to the kernel of their story and helping them craft the important pieces of their history.
Have you thought about maybe at some point doing a refresh of the book? Obviously the field have moved on, or a new set of GCs, or the new Fortune 500, whatever. Have you thought about that as a refresh?
We have talked about it. So one of the interesting and really exciting things that sprung from the book was the concept of leadership, right? And helping women legal leaders further develop in that vein. Develop toward as general counsel and towards general counsel. And for a number of years before COVID, we hosted leadership institutes around this. And that may be something we revive, right? Where it's an in-person learning and networking experience. We've talked about doing a refresh. We've also talked about taking a little different slant and perhaps talking about women serving on boards. That's a very important thing, and something that has its own set of courageous attributes. So we're in very low-key discussions about what we might do next, though we often get a request to do a refresh or something similar, but with a different lens.
Have you thought about starting a podcast?
I'm not as talented at that as you are.
Well, Kara, I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing this story about this really, really interesting book. As you know, I have a lot of audience guests and audience who are general counsels, and I'm sure they'll be really interested in hearing about this, and I really appreciate you taking the time to tell me about it.
It's my pleasure. I think it's a really powerful tool for young lawyers to think about their career and think about the fact that it's not necessarily a straight path to these leadership roles. In fact, one of our general counsels described it not as a ladder, but as a spaghetti bowl, where you jump in and you circle around and you pop out and you jump back in. And I thought that was an interesting visual for it. And there still is a need for more diversity in the general counsel's office, not to take anything away from the folks who are serving in those roles now, but it's not nearly as diverse as we would like. And as I work with lots of general counsel and aspiring general counsel, particularly women, and helping them develop in those roles, the importance of courage can't be overstated.
That's super cool. If you do a refresh of the book, please come back and tell me about it.
Will do. Thank you, Richard.
This is Richard
Nice
Hsu.
to see you.
This is Richard Hsu and Kara Baysinger. Thanks.